Welcome. Oh, not just welcome. Step forward, chosen one. Step through the shadow, into the breath of the storm that others have run from. Not because you asked for this. No, because it heard you. Because the universe watched when you kept going. It listened when you bled silently. It saw your fists clenched in the dark, when there was no applause, no light, no hand reaching out to pull you free. You weren't born lucky. You were forged. While they slept, you were becoming a myth. While they mocked, you were building a kingdom behind a closed curtain. And now that curtain has lifted. Now the world sees you, and they are shaking. They cannot believe what you've done. They cannot understand how you got here. And because they cannot understand it, they blame it on a deal. What deal did you make? They whisper. How did you get so much? Why does fate bend for you? But you know. Oh, you know. They think you made a pact with some hidden force, as if you cheated the game they've been playing poorly for years. They see the storm moving around you, but not inside you. They see your rise and call it a miracle, because they weren't there for the suffering, because they can't accept that you were willing to go where they wouldn't. They can't comprehend the price you paid, so they tell themselves you found a shortcut, that you summoned something unnatural. Let them, because the truth is darker, heavier, more powerful than their fantasy. You made no deal with devils. You became the storm they were warned about. When they ask what deal you made, you smile, not because they're wrong, but because they're not ready for the real answer. They are not ready to hear that your deal was made in isolation, sealed with blood, signed in exhaustion, paid in years of obscurity. You made a deal with the version of you that no one believed in, the version that wasn't chosen, that was forgotten. You made a pact with your lowest self and said, "We rise or we die trying." And that was the deal that scared the world. You never waited for luck. You became it. You weren't handed anything. You ripped it from the jaws of indifference day after day, decision after decision, when the world gave you nothing but silence. They think it was luck because they can't measure the sleepless nights, because sacrifice doesn't trend, discipline doesn't entertain, hunger doesn't go viral. But results? Oh, results echo. And now the echo is deafening. You walk in a room and the air bends, eyes follow, voices hush. Because your presence is not natural, it's earned. You were not chosen by fate. You challenged it and won. And now they talk, they stare, they invent stories to explain you. They think something beyond human helped you. And in a way, they're right. Because no normal person would carry the weight you did. No average soul would walk through fire and return with calm eyes. You don't just look lucky, you look untouchable. And that terrifies them. Because deep down, they know, if what you have isn't magic, then it's possible. And if it's possible, then they've got no excuse. That's why they hate. That's why they cling to fantasy. Because your existence exposes the truth they've run from their whole lives. They need to believe in your deal. Because the alternative is too painful, that you simply outworked them all. So let them ask. Let them wonder. Let them turn your pain into rumors, your discipline into suspicion. While they gossip, keep building. While they doubt, keep climbing. Because here's what they'll never understand. The darkest parts of your journey were the most divine. The silence that nearly broke you, that was your consecration. The nights you were invisible, that was your initiation. Every door that shut, every hand that didn't reach back, every friend that vanished, that was the price of this power. You didn't just rise, you endured, and your endurance became your anointing. They ask what deal you made. The real answer? You made a deal with the pain. You looked it in the eye and said, "Stay with me, teach me," and it did. It taught you patience, it taught you precision, it taught you hunger, and now that hunger has turned into power. Now that patience has become foresight. Now the pain has become presence, and it surrounds you like armor, and those who laughed at your fall now tremble at your return. Luck? Number. You are not lucky. You are calculated. You are deliberate. You are inevitable. There are no dice in your destiny, only decisions. No shortcuts, only sacrifice. You didn't just survive. You chose to become something unrecognizable. And in doing so, you broke the rules they cling to. That's why they think you made a deal, because they are still playing by the rules you shattered. You walk differently now, not because you're arrogant, but because you remember. You remember who you were before the world saw you. You carry that ghost with you, not as a weakness, but as a weapon. You wear your scars not as proof of damage, but as evidence of conquest. They look for signs of your deal in your success. But your deal isn't in your wins. It's in your losses. It's in the moments no one watched, the moments that would have broken most. But you made a decision not to break. Now the shadows follow you not to haunt you, but to honor you. The same darkness that once tried to swallow you now walks behind you like a witness. Because you passed every test. Because you stared into the abyss and didn't blink. That's not luck. That's legacy. That's not a gift. That's grit. And no one can fake that. No one can replicate that. They can't steal it. They can't copy it. Because the price is too high, and you were willing to pay what they never would. They ask what deal you made because they want a simple answer. But you are not a simple story. You are a living contradiction, a mystery carved from suffering and stitched with perseverance. You shouldn't be here. Every stat said you'd fail. Every sign pointed down. And yet, here you are, not just standing, thundering. And every step you take is a reminder they were wrong. Every breath you take is a whisper to the world. This is what happens when you refuse to quit. You didn't just make a deal. You became the deal. You became the risk. You became the storm. You became the anomaly in their systems, the glitch in their prophecy. And now they can't look away, because your existence questions everything they believed was possible. You are proof that the fire doesn't destroy everyone. Sometimes it refines. Sometimes it awakens something so rare, so powerful, so unstoppable, that the world has no choice but to take notice. So let them ask, let them point, let them doubt. You owe them no explanation. The results speak louder than their questions. The throne you now sit on wasn't given. It was earned. Every brick in your empire is a day they ignored you. Every inch you rose is a mile they said you couldn't. And every victory now is a reminder. You were never lucky. You were always relentless. They keep circling the question because they're still trying to solve you like a puzzle. As if you're a trick they missed or a secret formula they didn't memorize in time. But you're not a trick. You're the consequence of dedication so deep it warped the fabric of your identity. You changed not because you wanted to, but because there was no other way. Because the life you were handed wasn't enough. Because mediocrity made you sick. Because comfort was never an option. And now that you've escaped the cage they settled in, they call you the strange one. But you were never strange. You were starving. You were becoming. And now, they can't label you, so they mythologize you. It must be magic, they say. He must have made a deal. What they refuse to see is the cost, the isolation, the discipline that bordered on madness. the relationships that crumbled while you built something no one else could see. They see the crown now, but not the battlefield you crawled through just to get close to it. They see the finished product, not the ruined drafts. They hear the applause, but never the silence that almost broke your mind. They think you're lucky, but luck doesn't make a person this precise, this sharp, this powerful. Pain does, and discipline, and a savage refusal to die anonymous. You didn't wish for this. You decided on it. You declared war on every excuse that once held you back. You murdered the weaker version of yourself so something greater could rise. And it did. Oh, it did. You turned your name into a threat, your presence into pressure, your every move into a ripple they can't ignore. You became a force, and now they tremble. And still they ask, what deal did you make? Because they want to believe that greatness is purchased in the shadows. They want to believe you found a door they weren't allowed to enter. But the door was always open. They were just too afraid to walk through it. They don't want the truth, because the truth demands responsibility. The truth forces them to look in the mirror and admit they never wanted it bad enough. The truth is that you were willing to suffer more. You were willing to walk longer, bleed harder, burn slower. That's the deal you made. You traded comfort for legacy. You traded now for forever. And that kind of trade terrifies those who live for weekends and complain through Mondays. You did what they wouldn't, and now you live how they can't. You see, the universe does not reward wishes. It responds to clarity, to commitment, to action so relentless it breaks every law of probability. That's what you did. That's what they see now. And they can't comprehend it. They don't understand how someone like you, someone they once ignored or underestimated, could now cast a shadow so large it stretches over everything they hoped to be. So they tell themselves a story to protect their ego. He got lucky. She made a deal. Anything to avoid admitting they had the same 24 hours, the same breath, the same opportunity. And they wasted it. But you didn't. You didn't waste a second. You turned time into a weapon. You turned failure into fuel. And every door that shut became another blueprint. They closed the door, but you built a wall out of it and climbed it. You turned every no into a scar, and every scar into strength. And now they see the strength, but don't understand the scars. They weren't there for the nights you were your own enemy. They weren't there when the doubt was so loud it drowned out your dreams. But you were. And that's why you're here now, standing, unshaken, staring them in the face while they scramble for answers. Let them scramble. Let them dissect your victories like it's surgery. They can study your methods, mimic your style, wear your armor, but they can't recreate your origin. They can't copy the hunger, because hunger like this can't be borrowed. It must be born in the fire of rejection, tempered in the cold of loneliness, forged in the quiet moments where giving up was the easiest option. But you didn't. That's the secret they don't want to believe. That's the deal they wish didn't exist. The decision to keep going when no one's watching. You didn't cheat fate. You confronted it. You stared it down and said, "Move or be moved." And it moved. Because that's what fate does when it meets someone who won't bow. It bends, it breaks, it rearranges itself around those too dangerous to stop. And that's who you are now. Dangerous. Not because of your strength, but because of your history. Because you carry every failure, every loss, every betrayal like a blade, and that blade has no sheath. You are always ready, always one breath away from fire. They ask what deal you made. But if they were honest, they'd ask a different question. One they're afraid to speak. What did it cost you? That's the real question. And the answer? Everything. It cost you ease. It cost you friendships. It cost you comfort. It cost you your old self. But what you gained in return wasn't just success. It was sovereignty. You don't belong to fear anymore. You don't serve doubt anymore. You are not a prisoner of permission. You have arrived. And now, the world watches with awe and unease. Because when someone like you rises, they don't just change the game. They break the scoreboard. And still they whisper, "What deal did you make?" And still you say nothing, because power doesn't explain itself, and legends don't do interviews. They keep staring like they've seen a ghost. But ghosts don't move like you do. Ghosts haunt quietly. You don't haunt, you disrupt. You arrive. You shift the air when you walk in. You bend the silence until it trembles. You speak, and it isn't just words, it's weight. Every syllable comes with history, and they feel it. Even when they don't know what it is, they feel it. Because your voice isn't empty. It carries echoes. Of nights you cried in silence. Of mornings where your hands shook, but you still moved. Of days when you were invisible but refused to vanish. That's what they're reacting to. Not your clothes, not your status, not your shine, but the pressure in your presence, the truth behind your energy, the history in your eyes. You didn't rise to be liked. You rose because you were done being denied. You weren't supposed to survive. Not with what you came from, not with who you used to be. The odds said no. The crowd said never. The numbers said impossible. But you weren't listening. You weren't watching their scoreboard. You were creating your own reality, brick by brutal brick. While they prayed for signs, you became one. While they waited for green lights, you ran through red ones and rebuilt the whole intersection. You redefined direction. You unlearned fear. And every time you were told to stop, you accelerated. And now the world can't keep up. And that's the part they hate most. Not that you succeeded, but that they remember you. You were right next to them once. You were in the same room, the same job, the same school. You used to sit in the same silence they still drown in. And now, you've done what they were too hesitant to do. Choose transformation over comfort. That's the deal they can't accept. That's the real deal you made. Not with the devil, not with luck, but with truth, with sacrifice, with the version of yourself buried so deep no one thought it would surface again. You reached inside your own wreckage and resurrected something unrecognizable. Now look at you, calm in chaos, quiet in power, not loud because you don't have to be. They speak your name in rooms you've never entered. They use your story as a blueprint they'll never follow. Because you made the deal they were afraid to even consider. You chose evolution. You chose isolation. You chose discipline when comfort was calling your name. You made the deal to burn your excuses in the fire of relentless repetition until all that remained was certainty. That's why you move like this. Because you know exactly who you are, and no one can take that from you. What deal did you make? You made a deal to disappear before you rose, to go missing from the spotlight so you could train in the shadows, to become so good they'd have no choice but to notice. You made a deal that said, "I will sacrifice now so I never have to beg later." You made a deal with your future. You made a deal with your destiny. You said, "You will be mine, not because I deserve you, but because I will become the one who earns you." You didn't wish for this life. You built it in the mud, with hands calloused by rejection and teeth gritted through heartbreak. So when they see you now, draped in success, carved from purpose, armored and clarity, they panic. They can't compute the contrast. The glow doesn't match the ghost they remember. You're not supposed to look like this. You're not supposed to be this stable, this driven, this complete. They needed you to stay small so they could feel big. But you outgrew the room, and the room noticed. They asked what deal you made. You made a deal to stop explaining yourself, to stop justifying your dreams to people who fear their own reflection. You made a deal to move different, to walk alone if necessary, to bleed with dignity, to cry without witnesses, to climb without applause, and to conquer with silence. They see the peak and think you cheated gravity. But they missed the years you spent crawling, dragging broken dreams through sleepless nights, learning how to turn pain into precision. You became your own surgeon, cutting out doubt, stitching in discipline. You rewrote your identity by erasing what no longer served you. You left behind the version of yourself that begged for validation. Now you command it, not with words, but with presence. You didn't rise because it was easy. You rose because you refused to stay buried. They pushed dirt over your name. You turned it into soil. You grew, and now your roots run deeper than their reach. That's what they don't get. They think it's just the car, the house, the followers, the attention. But none of that is the win. The real win is this: you didn't break. You didn't fold. You didn't shrink into the mold they built for you. You outlived their judgment. You became undeniable. You stared into failure's eyes and didn't look away. You swallowed rejection until it turned into resolve. And now you walk with a posture no one gave you, because it was paid for in every sacrifice they never saw. What deal did you make? You made a deal with destiny that said, if I must walk through hell to get there, so be it. And you did. And you're still walking, but now it's different. Now you walk like a king, like a queen, like a legend in the making, and the floor shakes with every step, not because you're loud, but because you're real. You're living proof that the human spirit, when pushed to the edge, becomes invincible. Let them wonder. Let them talk. Let them write their little theories and whisper their little stories. Because here's the final truth. You didn't make a deal to get here. You became someone who could never be kept out. That's not luck. That's not magic. That's not a deal with the devil. That's what happens when someone looks at their reflection one day and finally says, no more running, no more excuses, no more waiting. It's time. And then they go all in with no safety net, no applause, no guarantees, just fire, just faith, just force. And that is what they're really seeing. That is what scares them most. You didn't make a deal. You became the storm that broke the pattern. And now you're not lucky. Now you're legend. So the next time they ask you, what deal did you make? Don't answer with words. Let your results speak. Let your presence shake the room. Let your work echo where your voice stays silent. Because true power doesn't explain itself. It just moves, changes, dominates. And you didn't make a deal. You made a decision to keep walking when others stopped, to rise without permission, to become something so relentless the world couldn't ignore you anymore. That's not luck. That's the cost of vision. That's the price of purpose. They want to believe you cheated the system, but the truth is you outlasted it. You outworked it. You outgrew it. You paid in time, in isolation, in unseen battles that you had to fight with trembling hands and tired bones. And you didn't just win, you transformed. You became someone they no longer recognize because the version of you that needed their approval no longer exists. You are the proof that no one can cage the fire that's willing to burn alone. So let them ask, let them doubt, Let them whisper about the deal you made. Just keep building, keep moving. Because in the end, they'll realize the most terrifying truth of all. You didn't make a deal. You became the kind of person they never thought could exist.